We're revisiting all of the legendary champions in DC Dark Legion today. Some of the first videos that I ever made for DC Dark Legion were covering the legendary champions that you should invest in versus the ones that you shouldn't. And to FunPlus's credit, over the last few months since global launch, they've done a really good job of updating the character kits on a few of these champions. It's actually made it quite difficult for me to continue with those videos being in existence without doing an update, because several of these champions actually now have a niche in the game. So there's at least one game mode where they might do well in, or at least certain specific comps that they're able to bolster and make better. In general, my view for how to treat these champions is they're really kind of the starter version of a lot of the mythic champions that are available, especially now that we're getting more champions, limited champions in the bleed. We've got a few other new mythic champions added to the game, and we expect that to continue over the coming months. We know that Helen, the community manager, has said that there will not be any more legendaries, or at least that's the plan. And now that we have the Wonder Woman Mythic Upgrade event, we do expect to see more events like that, so that eventually down the road, months from now, probably sometime next year, all of these legendary champions will have an event in the game with an overworld where you can upgrade that champion into mythic status. In the meantime, I think typically the gameplay loop when you first start out in the game, you're kind of trying to figure out a team of 5 champions that is going to work for you until you do start unlocking some of the mythics, and you start doing some of the bleed champion pulls for champions you're going to build your roster around, like Superman or the Joker. Ultimately, you will have to decide which of these that you want to focus on, and part of it is dependent on which ones you end up getting lucky and pulling to start out in the game. But we'll go through each individual champion and talk about some of the pros and cons for why you should use them, and some of the changes that have been made that make them actually viable now. Obviously, the first one we'll talk about is Wonder Woman, because as you can see here, she is upgradable to Mythic now, and we've always been, myself and several of the other people who've been making tier lists for the game for the last 6 or 7 months, we've always been very high on Wonder Woman as one of the best legendaries in the game, and really one of the best guardian champions in the game, and that hasn't changed at all. In fact, she's even better now because we've got her into this mythic status. She has 2 ways to incapacitate, and those stuns have actually increased because of the upgrade to mythic status, and she just has a ton of defense and is able to survive in a ton of fights where most of your other champions can't. She does also get that Wonder Woman tag now, so this is, to me, the number one most important legendary champion in the game when you first start out, to try to get stars on and upgrade as quickly as you can. And the good news is you get Wonder Woman to start the game, so you kind of get a little bit of a head start from that perspective. Another champion that you get when you first start the game is Green Arrow, and I think Green Arrow is, to this day, one of the most consistent physical damage dealers in the game. He's range DPS, and he is just an overall really good champion that a lot of long-term players, even whales, are continuing to use in Justice League comps and other things. Just a really solid champion to use in combat cycle. And I will use him in a lot of cases where you need a champion that can target the back line, because you can do that with his ultimate. Green Arrow does have an incapacitate ability of his own, and he kind of thrives on crit damage. So again, really good champion to have in your roster, and highly recommended that you build him for the long term. The third champion that you're sort of given to start the game is Mera, and she's going to be the first healer that you have access to, at least until you can build up Ivy or Raven or one of the other healers. She is really solid for just base healing, just the ability to heal your team, keep your team alive, especially once you start investing into her force talents. The problem is that she doesn't scale well at all. So because of the way her kit is designed, she doesn't have really any interactions with any of the tag synergies, and so I think that makes her a little bit less desirable for end game. Now, there are a lot of whales and longtime players who will still use Mera in their PvP teams and their combat cycle, just because her stats scale up to the legend, or to red stars, which kind of puts her on par with like purple looking at the Wonder Woman upgrade, kind of the mid to high purple stars for the kind of output you're going to be getting from her. So until you're able to start getting champions to yellow stars or red stars, Mera is going to continue to be a pretty solid healer for a roster. So another one, those are kind of the top three. Wonder Woman, Mera, and Green Arrow are the top three that I would recommend that people can safely build regardless of what roster they're going for. And the next two champions are ones that can give you really high damage output, and they are definitely also champions that you're probably going to be using to the mid and even late game, especially if you're a free-to-play player. But even if you're a light spender, you're probably going to end up using these champions in some way for combat cycle and other reasons. But the first one is going to be Black Adam. This is a champion that I've always really liked to use. He's one of the first spiritual damage dealers that you get access to in the game. And, if you don't have access to Sinestro or Constantine, or you don't have them at high stars, then Black Adam is really going to be your best bet for dealing with some of the spiritual damage combat cycle bosses and that sort of thing. His ultimate is an AoE, so that makes him quite nice for several setups and just kind of like trying to whittle away the health of the entire opposing team and kind of like put some pressure on their healer. So again, really good champion to build for the long term. And then we have Red Hood, who I haven't always been the biggest fan of. Red Hood, he's a Bat Family champion. He's also League of Assassins, and the League of Assassins team isn't quite built out well, but he does have that Weapon Master tag, and I've seen him used to great effect on not just Bat Family teams, but a lot of other team comps out there for new players and non-spenders and some light spenders as well, especially early on when you just don't have a lot of champions who can deal AoE damage. He's very squishy if you don't have a lot of force invested in him or if you don't have him at high stars. But once you do get him into the red stars and throw a little bit of force on him, he is quite formidable and he can do a ton of damage if you have the right legacy piece equipped to him. Just another overall champion that is worth investing in depending on what you're trying to do with your roster. And this is kind of the last champion that's able to do a decent amount of damage out of all the legendaries. And the next three champions that I want to focus on are ones that I don't recommend you put a lot of force into, but champions that do offer some benefits depending on what kind of team you're building. And the first champion is going to be Adam, and Adam is a champion that used to not be that great. They made some adjustments to his kit. The way he works is when his ultimate goes off, he will leave the battle, and he used to deal a lot of damage on his ultimate, but that was really all he did. He left the battle and then it's over with. Just not really that great of a kit. And what they did was they added a stun onto the end of the ultimate. So if you have him at 5 red stars, he will do a stun for 2 seconds before he exits the battle. And this has made him considerably better as a legendary champion, and he is someone that I use a lot in training sim. I think that's kind of the best use for him. I've also seen people use him effectively in 3v3 on one of their teams. But being able to shut down the entire opposing team blocks healers from healing, blocks your guardians from trying to pull aggro, and it also will block their DPS, which typically you're trying to block, like a Deathstroke or a Nightwing from being able to attack you for a moment while you can kill them. It's just really, really good utility. So he's a champion that doesn't require much, if at all, on the force tree. I think I have a little bit in him. Actually, I have 0, and I still use him very effectively. So that's the first one. The next one is going to be Captain Cold. And you guys know I have strongly disliked Captain Cold for a long time with this game. It's the reason why I have all these additional shards that I haven't upgraded on him, because he just really was useless in my opinion. The reason for that was his ultimate just did not work. Hasn't worked for like half a year now, but they finally fixed it, and Captain Cold is actually really good in several of the combat cycle bosses now. Anytime you have a single target or a small team of 5 champions and that's all there's going to be, there's not going to be respawns, Captain Cold is incredibly good. So the way his ultimate works is he's going to inflict frostbite on one enemy, and it's a guaranteed infliction of frostbite for 10 seconds. And I mean, by the time that 10 seconds ends, you probably will be able to cycle back around to his ultimate again. So you can kind of keep this buff up or debuff up the entire boss fight. And Frostbite will increase the target's physical damage taken by 60% if you have Captain Cold to at least red 1. And the reason that makes him amazing is Cyborg can do the same thing, but it's going to take a lot longer to get Cyborg to 5 red stars or 1 red star, basically to the point where you can match that description on the ultimate. The difference is Cyborg's ability affects kind of most of the battlefield, like 80 or 90% of the battlefield, whereas Cold only affects 1 enemy. But again, if you're looking at like, this is a budget version of what I can get with these other champions, I think Cold offers a ton of utility now. Again, a champion that you don't want to put a lot of force into him, but while we're here, I'll show you. I have invested a little bit in him. I did 1 of 5 on everything, and then I invested into his energy gain. That's really if you had to pick one, that's the one you want to max out, because it's going to allow him to cycle that ultimate every time that 10 seconds is about to expire. And the third champion in this group is going to be Vixen. Vixen is a champion that works really well with birds of prey. That's really all she has. She has the metahuman tag, so she can work with like a Superman comp. But what I've found is, as far as the support champions, she's probably the worst of the lot, but still useful in a way, you know, if you can get her to 5 red stars. And I don't know that you would need to invest too much force in her as well. But again, she offers some utility until you're able to build up champions like Zatanna and even Cold or Cyborg. Again, I would rather focus on some of those mythic level champions rather than focusing on her. I think that, you know, getting your Captain Cold up is going to be probably your best choice in terms of you know, trying to support and augment physical damage at the beginning. But she is decent enough. You know, I have her ranked in, I think, C or D tier on my tier list. Again, if I have a champion ranked in C or D, that means that I don't recommend that you put any force into them if you can avoid it. So that's kind of the way I stand on Vixen, but just wanted to point out that she actually does have some utility. And then the last 2 that we'll talk about are champions that I really think are dead in the water right now. We have Killer Croc, who I used to recommend as like, yeah, you should kind of upgrade him as an off tank, but I really think he just, with all of the great Guardian and Warrior champions that are in the game now that you can get access to down the road, this is a champion you should not be putting any force investment into. And finally, Catwoman. Unfortunately, I think she is the worst champion in the game right now. I do like her kit, but they did a nerf of Catwoman's kit, you know, well before global launch happened, so nobody playing the game right now probably remembers it or is aware of it. But she used to be able to just do a massive amount of damage. She can siphon off damage from the enemies she's facing. She was able to siphon a lot more than that and was able to get a lot more damage output, especially on single target bosses. That's no longer the case, and unfortunately it takes a massive amount of investment to get her to be even halfway reasonable as sort of an off tank champion. And in the time and energy that it would take to do that for her, I would rather you put that into a low star Superman. And we've been talking the last few weeks or last couple of months about how low star Superman really isn't even worth your time unless you're just a like super light spender who loves Superman. But even then, like I would rather have a 5 white Superman or like a low blue star Superman built up than it put a single ounce of force into Catwoman. She just really isn't worth using or investing in right now. That's really it for the legendary champions. You know, you've got, I think, 3 that are top tier champions that are 100% worth using, investing force into, and having long term for your account. You know, that's going to be your Wonder Woman, Green Arrow, and Mera, especially Wonder Woman, because we know we can upgrade her now. We have 2 champions that do a lot of damage if you do invest into them just a little bit, and that's going to be Red Hood and Black Adam. I think those are 2 solid champions. We have 3 supporter champions who are not going to be like the best in class at anything. They're not going to be used in a ton of game modes, but they have a niche that are worth using them in, especially Adam and Captain Cold. Those 2 champions have definitely bumped up on the list for me. I think Captain Cold is probably going to move up a spot or 2 on my tier list. He may make it into B tier just because of that early utility now that his ultimate works. Vixen is kind of on the lower end of that, probably closer to Killer Croc and Catwoman, but you know, I think those, I'm curious to see what happens when we start getting all these champions champions upgraded into Mythic, where they fall in the pecking order. I think some of them are still going to stay at the bottom of the list, but given the utility that we've seen with champions like Adam and Captain Cold and your Red Hood, I really want to see what they look like when they're upgraded, and I think we can reasonably expect some changes to their kit. Probably nothing crazy, but potentially some game changers for a couple of these. Red Hood is like a fan favorite, and I'm just really anxious to see what it will look like when he becomes a Mythic as well. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoy this, and hopefully this will be a more informative video for those who've been watching the old ones, because those old ones are definitely outdated at this point. If you haven't already, definitely would appreciate it if you will hit the subscribe button. I do a lot of DC Dark Legion content, and I hope to see you in the next video.